welcome. We are almost at nightfall here in Montreal at the footside of this sacred ancient site of Montreal known by the Murrays as Hatum. We are here today to share with you a step further in the path to know better this race, all the races, but specifically the race of Mu. And I will start by sharing with you a very ancient knowledge. We, as human beings, each of us, during the conception, reproduce step by step all the history of the creation since the first forms of organic life, unicellular life, until the present of humanity in the fifth race. In this sense, we are holographic beings. In our physicality, we are holographic, not just in our minds, not just in the inner realm of the soul, but also, as is above is below, we are holographic not just in the soul and spirit, but we are holographic in our physicality and in the way in which our physical form evolves during conception. During the 9th month in the womb of the mother, we recreate all the steps that happened within the great womb of Mother Earth, of the great mother of the world. All the steps are reproduced since the unicellular organisms to the advanced human being that we are today, to the human baby that is going to be delivered, given to the world for a human experience. So let's look at this together in detail. The first cells, the first organic forms of life were unicellulars. Okay? This is in the material form, the unicellular cell. And actually, in the initial step of the conception, we have two unicellular cells that mix together to create a gamete. Because we are in the third dimension, and creation here is by friction of two opposite forces, positive and the negative, female and male, two poles create the matter. Because this is the case and the law of this dimension, we have the opposite that represents the aspect of matter, and it has a huge a small nucleus, like that's the same, but a huge body of matter, a huge cytoplasm that has the mitochondria and has all the small organelles for the cellular function. But it's the cell, and it's a form of life, unicellular life by itself. On the other side, we have the spermatozoid. The spermatozoid, which has almost no cytoplasm, it's just a nucleus with a big tail that helps the descent and motility. It has a flagell that's called the tail that allows him to move. And this cell is almost only genetic information. There's almost no cytoplasm. It represents the concept or the principle of spirit. So with the spermatozoid representing the spirit, the positive pole, and the ovule representing matter or the negative pole, these two unique cells, unicellular organisms combine to form a first single cell that then from this single cell form of life will start to divide and revivify all the steps of evolution of the form. First, going into morula, and the morula is a multicellular form of life. Then getting the embryo that is consistent of 3 layers, and this represents the vegetable world. And then this 3-layer embryo start to evolve ramifications that will be the limbs and the eyes and a tail. It also has a tail that will represent the reptilian part, but it starts evolving first. You know, the bats of the limbs and the upper and lower limbs, and this is what represents the life of insects. It's really, you look at this first couple of days, embryos are like, oh, this seems like what snail? What is this? Represents the insect life, and then from there has a little tail, and we go to the reptile world and the first animals. And when we're at the instance of the animal world, all the base of the brain is developed with all the functions that are automatic: breathing, the heartbeat, all the functions that have been tested and perfected in the animal world to help us be independent and live a life that has a baseline of functions that are done by themselves. Imagine if you had to think when you take every breath or activate your heart pulsation to keep alive. That would mean that we wouldn't do much more, because if we forget, we'll just perish and die there. So all these functions of basic maintenance of life that evolved in the animal form are developed in the animal part of development, when the embryo looks a little bit more like a reptile. And then it continues to evolve the parts that allowed interconnection, all the senses, organs, to interact with outside reality. And then it developed also interconnection between the 2 hemispheres to allow sharing of information from the right to the left. And then finally the frontal part of the brain is developed that allows us to interact also in a social means with the outer world. So each of these instances of evolution that happen on the earth since the first unicellular organism until our 5th human sample and reproduce within gestation. And this is very important to say, because we revivify every single birth of a human being has just went through the whole process of evolution of thousands of millions of years for the human experience here on planet Earth. And we are also revivifying the 4 races that came before. So as we in the material life go through all the line of material evolution, in many occult aspects, we also consolidate aspects and characteristics of the races that precede us. And for that point, we are going to start by sharing with you the name and characteristics of the 5 races, going from the one that we have now, that is let's put it here, the one not here, let's put it here, the one that we are living now, incarnated now, is the, according to Elena always, is the 5th race, the human race. But we have before 4 races. We have the Atlantic race, and this has been mentioned for the first time in today's humanity records. The name Atlantis appears for the first time mentioned by Platon in his writings. And Platon is repeating a history that Solon told him, another philosopher. And Solon has heard this history from the very high priests in Egypt. From Egypt, from the high priests to Solon, to Platon, to us. This is how we hear for the first time about the Atlantic continent. So humanity, 5th race, 4th race, Atlantic, 3rd race, Lemur, and 2 other races. And we're going to start to focus on them today. There's not much that can be said about the first 2 races, but we can find some small traces here and there. They almost do not have a history of their own. They're so far away in time that they escape completely from the collective memory, even of our ancient writings. Moreover, it is said that these 2 races were not inhabiting a physical realm, and I will go into this right now. Imagine we have reviewed the process of preparation of the earth through thousands of millions of years to form and to create the adequate material, physicality that would allow life on the surface of the planet. Remember that we said that the first times the activity was happening down in the womb of the earth. There were fires, there were eruptions, and these fires and heat allowed a combination of atoms, the bonding of electrons to create from very simple atoms, more complex atoms that then could, through the heat liberated by subterranean explosions, combine themselves in molecules. So this was a very, very active phase of lifetime, much more active than what she has today, but everything was happening underneath in the womb of the earth. And the earth was full of fire, full of volcanic eruptions, full of explosions. It was a mineral age. So once all the brickles, once all the elements were there to start creating, there was still huge heat that could not tolerate life in physicality in the earth. But another great teaching, occult teaching, is that we live in the physical earth. As human beings, we have a physical body, but we know also that we have other bodies that are more subtle, less physical, overlapping our physical body. The same happens to Earth. Earth has her physical body, but has another chain of skin or 7 other bodies that are not so physical, they're less physical, and they go into more subtle planes of existence. This was the same for the Earth. So the conditions of the Earth were not there for life, conscious life, to start living on Earth, they would have died. There's no possibility in a Earth that is almost exploding with fires to sustain life in this material world. So the first race was not physical, but was ethereal. On the one hand, the Earth said, I'm ready to start the path to fulfill the experience, to be able to host conscious life. Because of this call from the Earth, from higher realms, solar beings, solar angels felt the call, and some of them decided to reply to this call and started to descend. And when they descend, they say from the central sun, the huge spiritual place of creation of everything that exists in terms of spirit, and they started to descend into more and more physical ways of experience. But they can't reach the Earth because she's not yet prepared, so they stop at the ethereal realm that is a little bit more subtle than the physical, and they start experimenting in the subtle realm. So the first race was ethereal. The Earth in that time was calling. Because it was ethereal, there were no sexes, there were no females and males. These are, from our perspective, what we still can call angelic beings. They don't need sex because they will not recreate themselves by sexual means, which are the law of recreation in this dimension, the physical third dimension. So they say that there were no sexual division. They reproduce by fission, which is also very primitive way of reproduction for unicellular beings. And it is said that this experience of the first race congregated in the etheric plane around the physical place that we know today as Mount Meru, in the Himalayan chain. They say also that Mount Meru was the first land that emerged from the deep oceans, and it is believed that this first race experience happened there in Mount Meru. From this race, we go to the second race. This is also an ethereal race. Very, very little information, almost no history of their own. And this race was living in what we call today the hyperboreal part of planet Earth. Again, not in third dimension, in the globe that is overlapping the physical globe, Earth, which is an ethereal globe. But within the ethereal globe, they located themselves predominantly in a region that was called Hyperborea. And it's more or less where we are now, a little bit more northern, but it comprises the northern parts of Canada, Greenland, Iceland, and some regions of Scandinavia, and the northern part of Asia as well. This race again was not a dual race. There was no poles of feminine and masculine. They were only single identities without a gender division, and it is said that they also reproduce by budding, which is another form of reproduction typical of unicellular forms of life. So here we are. We have shared everything that is known about the first two races, and we are right now in the portal of the Lemurian race. So next time we will start to develop more specifically about our topic of interest, that is the Lemurian race. But of course we have to put this race in a whole concept within the history of the races so that their characteristics are well understood and comprehended. Otherwise it's give information that doesn't have a common setting or place of action. So next chapter we go again straightforward, deep into the knowledge we find of the race of Mu. Thank you very much.